Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Get Recc'd. I am one of your hosts, Louis Falgout.
And I am your other host for this evening, Stephen Falgu.
Yes. And so before we begin, I'd just like to explain the nature of this show, as this is the first episode, and you may be very confused. You may be thinking, well, what is this? What is this odd titled show with these two?
Do I want to get wrecked?
The answer is yes, you absolutely do. And on this show, the way it's going to work is this is what I have dubbed a rec swap or a recommendation swap. That's what rec means. It's a recommendation. So every episode, I will give Steven something to watch, to listen to play, any form of media. I will tell him that he has to watch it or finish it or whatever. And then he will do the same for me. When we come back, we will discuss both of those things that we recommended to each other. Now, is that clear, Stephen? Is that do you think that sums it up?
Yeah, basically, we're recommendation swapping, as you mentioned, and then we'll give our thoughts. It might be a review. It might be, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. I don't even want to talk about it. Who knows?
Well, we got to talk about it. We have to entertain everyone. It's very important. Anyway. So yeah, I guess we'll just get started here. Both him and I recommended each other something before this first episode, and we have not explained our thoughts on either of these things beforehand. I'm very interested to find out personally, as I'm sure you are too. And we will begin with what Steven recommended to me, and I'll let you take this one, Steven. Here it is.
So the classic film from 2016, Dreamworks Trolls. I want to give you a little bit of an overview of Trolls before we hear your thoughts. For those who don't know, Trolls was written by the writers of Kung Fu Panda 1 through 3 and Monsters vs. Aliens. So a decent track record. And it was directed by the people who directed Shipwrecked and Sponge Out of Water. So off to a good start. It includes voice talent such as Anna Kendrick, Justin Timberlake, Zooey Deschanel, and others. Some other facts, $125 million budget, wow. And it went on to a $46 million open and a $344 million total box office.
Okay.
There's already a sequel in the work, but I thought, Louis, specifically why you would be most interested in this film. And this is a fun fact I found online for you.
Okay.
So James Corden, he was in this movie.
He was.
This is your fun fact for you. This is his first animated film since Norma the North.
Oh my God! What? He was in Norma the North?
He was in the classic film Norma the North.
I didn't even know that. I knew he was in the Emoji Movie.
Yes. What a track record he has, huh?
Yeah, I'm glad he's really doing the animation industry a service.
So the final thing I'll mention, it actually was a nomination for Academy Award for Can't Stop This Feeling, but in DreamWorks Trolls. And then there's a sequel planned for February 14, 2020.
Oh.
So it included songs by Earth, Wind, and Fire, Ariana Grande, of course, Justin Timberlake.
Gorillas.
The Gorillas.
Well, it's okay, so I guess I'll start, right? We're good? We got the facts out of the way?
Yeah, that's the facts.
Well, one fact I will add is that this is a jukebox musical. I don't know why. Like, okay. When I think jukebox musical, I imagine the reason they're singing other people's songs is because it has something to do with the plot, you know? Like maybe they run a music shop or something, you know?
Yep.
But in this film, to me, it struck me as they're singing other people's songs because they didn't want to put in the time or the effort to write their own.
Right.
And they did write two of their own, and you can see how that turned out. So I mean,
Academy Award nominations.
Well, yeah, that's true, but also utter shit. I have to say, the song with I already forgot all the characters' names, which I generally do for even good films. So it's not to say anything negative on Trolls in that regard.
Right.
But So whoever Anna Kendrick played, the pink troll, the main character pink troll.
Yeah, I believe her name was Janice or Susan or something.
I'll look it up on IMDb real quick, but she had a song in this film, and it was a pile of shit. It started out as like your typical show tune, but like she was trying to shove way too many words into every line, and then it just devolved into a very, very, very trite pop song. And then of course we had another very, very trite pop song, which was a hit before the movie came out. So I suppose they did a good job marketing it in that regard, because it was made for the movie. Can't Stop This Feeling, right? That's what it's called?
Yep, Can't Stop This Feeling.
Yeah, it's not very good, suffice to say. But on top of those songs, they also let's see what their names are. On top of those songs, they also sing Poppy and Branch. They are the two main characters. So anyway, on top of those songs, they also sing such numbers as Bonnie Tyler's Total Eclipse of the Heart. They sing Lionel Richie's Hello.
Hello? That was a classic.
They sing Cyndi Lauper's True Colors. They sing Clint Eastwood by the Gorillaz, or by Gorillaz. That was a surprise.
Right?
They sing, what else?
There was an Earth, Wind, and Fire in there.
Oh, I forgot. The best part of the film is when they did a cover of Simon and Garfunkel's The Sound of Silence.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
I will say this. Better than the Disturbed cover. I will say that. But
only marginally, though.
Only marginally.
So I want to take a step back and get your thoughts. I'm looking at the image that we have up.
Of course.
What the hell? Okay. I don't understand. Look, I don't think it's not unfair to say that neither of us really got into the Trolls toy craze. Is that even a thing that happened?
I don't even
know.
I was never a part of that. No.
We were never into the Trolls lore and fandom. I'm sure the wiki could enlighten us.
The Trolls.
But just looking at the makeup of their village, like, what is that little thing that the big guy was carrying around?
It was a
cute thing. Then this, like, thin-necked Rastafarian they had.
Yeah. Also, there were two trolls whose hair was connected like Siamese twins, but only their hair.
Right, which you think they would learn how to untangle.
On one hand, you could certainly praise the variety, but on the other hand...
It's a very diverse village.
The character designs are fucking awful. I'm sorry, look at these characters. Do these look appealing to anybody?
I mean, just look how recognizable they are.
Yeah, they look ugly. They look completely ugly. And it's not even and it's funny because they have another village whose they're basically like bridge trolls, you could call them. I forget what their actual species name is.
Yeah, the Bergens.
The Bergens, that's right.
Something like that.
That's right, you're right, Bergens. They are supposed to look ugly, but the main characters look ugly. So I didn't really see much of a distinction.
Yeah, I almost felt like in this film about the classic toy series Trolls,
of course,
the Bergens had more personality in design than the Trolls did.
They did. Their designs tended to reflect... Well, no, I won't even go that far. There are like two character designs I can think of that really reflected the characters. Branch, who played by Justin Timberlake, he's the kind of grayish one there next to I already forgot her name again. Poppy.
Right.
That's right, Poppy. But not like I'm Poppy, like Poppy. And then the other guy, that's Branch, that's Justin Timberlake. He is a troll who doesn't like happiness and he doesn't like friendship. He looks like...
And you're forgetting the most important part. He does not like to sing.
That's right. He doesn't like to sing. That's right. And there's a real tearjerker scene in there about how he doesn't like to sing. But forgetting that for a moment,
when his grandma got eaten or something. Yeah,
his grandma died. So he you see him and you can totally see that because he's like he's in color, he's different than all the other trolls. You know? So you see that in him. And so I'll say that about him. And for the Bergens, the only one who I'll say was a really great character design was the lead villain, whose name was, what was her name?
The chef.
Oh, was that serious? Yeah, her name was Chef. Wow. Okay. Well, well, Chef. Yeah, Chef. Chef was an imposing villain character design, and I'll give them that. But other than that, I mean.
Well, okay. Here, let me ask you this then: who was your favorite character, and why was it that cloud guy? That classic character. He really brought a lot to the table.
He was basically just a stoner character, essentially.
He had that really just what a knee slapper scene when he's making Justin Timberlake give him a high five,
right,
but then
yeah.
Justin Timberlake's too slow.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was a scene. This okay, so I haven't really been clear on what my thoughts are of this film. Here are my thoughts.
Yeah.
And notice the difference. It's not It's a solid
Right.
This film is completely in the middle. Like I don't necessarily dislike it, and I also don't like it. It's a film that fluctuates consistently between being total trash and being all right.
Yeah, and I think maybe so I would agree in this case. I think that maybe the context for that is you and I are coming off the heels in terms of animated films, the Angry Birds movie and the Emoji movie. And this is like not those.
Yeah.
I was going to say this is like a dream compared to those, but I don't know if I'd say that.
Yeah.
But it was at least something where I was like, okay, that was a watchable film.
It's not a bad movie. Like that, I don't think this movie is bad. But I don't think it's actually good either. And that would be the only way that you could categorize it, because it looked like it was going to be shit from the beginning. If it was good, it would be actually good.
Yeah, well, DreamWorks has this way of like putting forward these films where you look at it and you say that has to be the worst thing to ever exist.
Right.
And then time and time again, they produce things that are good to mediocre.
Well, that is with a few exceptions, because Kung Fu Panda is something that sounds terrible, but both the first and second Kung Fu Panda films are great.
Right, exactly. So that's what I'm saying.
And How to Train Your Dragon, the marketing and title is stupid as fuck. The film's one of the only 2 10 out of 10s I've given all decade that I have seen. So DreamWorks can do it. Like that's
right, exactly. So that's exactly my point. It's like you see these things and it's like, wow, that has to just be shit. And then it's either really good or in this case, it's a movie.
Yeah. I mean, they did make Shark Tale. Like, let's not forget, it's not like DreamWorks can't make shit, because they can.
Right, they can. It's not Shark Tale, but other films, I'm sure.
That's the thing, though, is this movie isn't... I can't say this movie is totally watchable throughout. Like I said, it kind of fluctuates and like, averages in the middle for me. Because when they're singing, I'm almost universally hating it. The songs are so cleanly produced, and... You know, maybe this wouldn't be such a problem if it had its own unique style, which it obviously doesn't because it's a jukebox musical. But even the songs they did write are really generic, especially Can't Stop the Feeling. So,
oh yeah,
and they're so clean, and they're so like saccharine. And not that I necessarily mind saccharine, but saccharine mixed with clean is when you get the really bad, like, category. And that's very much what this brings to the table. And when it comes to its renditions of other songs, even most of the other songs they sang, like, are songs that I do not care for, and I would still much prefer to listen to the original versions than to listen to the trolls sing these songs. So
this is probably the first time where I would disagree, because I I enjoyed most of the musical numbers. I think there were some that definitely missed. I think Can't Stop This Feeling is just a terrible song.
Yeah.
But I really, and that maybe I should also say, my favorite character, I don't even remember her name, but it was the Zooey Deschanel's character.
The Bergen?
Yeah, the Bergen, the handmaid.
Her name is Bridget.
Bridget, right. So I actually really liked Bridget's and Zooey Deschanel's rendition of "Hello." I thought that was actually pretty good.
Oh.
I thought it was kind of hilarious, actually, that they would inject "Hello" from Lionel Richie into this movie, and then the Sound of Silence one too. I was like, "What in the world is this?"
As in, it was good.
I mean, I don't know if I would say I thought the renditions were good. I just thought it was an enjoyable rendition.
Oh.
Who sang that one? Anna Kendrick, I think, sang that one. It was
Poppy.
Poppy,
I'm
right?
gonna say that one. It did very much what the Disturbed cover did, which was take the Sound of Silence and make it way too clean, which it really couldn't have been in the '60s anyway. But it's so just so it's so produced. Especially the vocals, because I will say this: it's not like it was a terrible cover. It's not like it was a terrible song, necessarily, right? Like if it weren't a cover, I wouldn't really have much of a problem anyway. It was just kind of bad. It's like the kind of thing that I hear and I'm like, ugh. But I don't know. That's about it. It wasn't among the worst renditions. One of the worst renditions, and I see what they were going for, was the Gorillaz song, which. They had the Bergen sing it, so they all sang it like really ugly, and obviously that was the point.
Yep.
Obviously that was the point, but it's just it didn't come together. Like it didn't. I know it was supposed to make me be like, oh, they're all like really depressed all the time, but the way it came across just felt dumb to me. Like there are other things you could have picked to make me care more than that. That's all I'll say. But. Yeah, I don't know. And it's not like I'm a big Gorillaz fan or anything. I don't get it. I don't know why they did that. And as a whole, I just don't understand why this was a jukebox musical. What plot-centric reason did this have to be a jukebox musical? Because if you don't have a plot-centric reason, I just interpret it as laziness.
Yeah, so maybe we can pause here. Speaking of the plot, maybe do you want to give like a quick plot synopsis?
Yeah, I'll give a plot synopsis. So in this film, there are the trolls that you see here on the cover. Not the cloud guy, he's not one of them, but everybody else. And they long ago in history, the Bergens had a big cage with a tree in it where they would breed trolls and eat them every trollstice. And the trolls believed that the only way to be happy is to eat a troll. Well, the trolls escaped a long time ago, and they formed their own village where all they do is party exclusively and nothing else. And the Bergen chef got kicked out of the village for some reason. Oh, because she couldn't give them a real troll. Couldn't give the king's son a real troll. So the king's son grows up, becomes the king. And now he thinks he can never be happy.
The King Bergen,
That's
specifically.
Right, the king of the Bergens. Because he thinks he can never be happy because he's never eaten a troll. Well, the chef is living on her own, and she finds the troll village. So she manages to bring some trolls back for the king.
Yeah, so what happens is, as you mentioned, the troll village, they're always partying.
Yeah.
Poppy throws a party for whatever reason.
A party
I don't
for
even remember.
sake.
And Justin Timberlake's character's like this basically paranoid conspiracy theorist. The Bergens are going to find us.
Yeah.
You'll quit partying, stop being so loud. Well, one day they party too loud, and the chef Bergen spots them.
Yeah. And so they take some of the trolls. So now Poppy and Branch have to go off on an adventure to get the trolls back. The reason the king isn't eating them is because he wants to wait till Trollstice, right? Then, in the second half of the second act, the film suddenly shifts gears for a while and becomes about this handmaid Bergen named Bridget, who we mentioned, who is in love with the king. And the trolls offer to help her talk to the king, because she's really awkward. She doesn't want to talk to him. They offer to help her talk to the king if she will help them save one of their trolls who they thought got eaten. So I don't know why they thought they could save him, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. So they help her find love, and then they get the troll and they run away.
Yeah, and specifically I want to talk about this scene here where they help her find love because this was probably my favorite scene of the film. Basically what happens is the trolls pretty her up and they all are standing on her head and their hair is magic. I don't know if we mentioned that.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
For whatever reason, their hair is magic.
Just because why the fuck not, right?
So they use all of their hair to give her like pretty hair, and they're helping her by like whispering the old classic cliche of like whispering to her what she should say. Well, she finds him like getting clothes or something.
Yeah, that's right. He was putting on clothes for the trollstice.
For trollstice, yeah. And so they go on a date. Their date is like pizza and roller disco.
Right, yeah.
And I love that scene. They're playing, I think this is when the Earth, Wind, and Fire song is happening. And she's like spinning him around above her head. It's great.
See, I have to immediately disagree with you here because I think this part of the movie is one of the reasons why this movie isn't a very strongly held together film, because it just switches gears all of a sudden and focuses on this plot for a while. The movie kind of just stops for like a good 20 minutes. And
I think that's actually a recurring problem with this movie. It feels like the scenes are all independent. So you have you have the starting, which, you know, makes sense. They get found out. Then the movie almost stops and it's like her and Justin Timberlake's character just like messing around in the forest forever.
Well,
trying to get to the castle.
Yeah, I was fine with that. The problem is that what happens next is that the castle scene is a significant portion of the film. It kind of feels like the film's separated into two distinct halves, and they don't really work together. Like I think Poppy and Branch had some character chemistry. I would have preferred more of the journeying to the castle than all the castle stuff we got, because the Bergen City looks ugly and drab, and so much of the movie is like taking place there, and it just, I don't know. But I'll let you.
Well, the other thing that's weird about the second half of the movie is, so basically the cast of characters that you see right here in this little promo thing we have up, minus the Cloud and minus Poppy and Branch, are the characters that get captured by the chef. So when they get to the castle, one of them is the one that you mentioned kind of gets quote unquote eaten.
Yeah.
Turns out not, but the rest of them were the ones in the cage that they ultimately free. So for the rest of the movie, you have this troll cast of characters, but none of the other ones are fleshed out at all. I could tell you nothing about them. They don't they're there for the rest of the film.
The ones that before you continue, I just want to say that the ones that are fleshed out are reduced to like one stereotype that they never stop being for the entire movie.
Like that silver one in the corner, like always talks in auto-tune.
Yeah, and he farts glitter, which is hilarious, by the way.
Yep, and then there's that little squishy thing that the big guy's holding that one time says a word, and everyone's like, what? It said a word.
Yeah, it wasn't funny. Sorry to just put that one out there. But
it said a word.
No, you're absolutely right. Poppy and Branch are the central characters, which you know, I would be fine with, but like I said, the movie pauses to be about Bridget, and then the trolls just take the sidelines, and we only like see Bridget after, like, we don't really know it. It just kind of, Bridget becomes a central character all of a sudden. You know, it's not like we focus on her. It's not like she's a B plot throughout the film or anything. So all the scenes where Poppy and Branch are walking through the forest, they are interspersed with the Bergens, but this handmaid girl, you don't really think she's going to be a lead character. It's not like it's some kind of twist in the plot when she suddenly becomes one. It just sort of happens. It's really strange. Like, I don't know. That's one thing about this movie is I would have liked it a little bit more if most of it took place in the forest. I'll just say that.
I like to think of this movie as just one big redemption arc for that chef character.
Does she get redeemed in the end? Wait, she didn't get redeemed. Didn't they, like, throw.
Oh no, they kicked her ass out again.
Yeah, so it wasn't there was no redemption.
But I love watching this chef try to. So you mentioned the chef finds the trolls and comes back to the kingdom, and everyone's like, "Yay, we can be happy again."
Right.
I think our audience would like to know whether they can or cannot become happy, because man, what a stupid end to a movie. But anyway, that aside for now. So she comes back, and clearly she has evil intentions, like somehow giving people trolls is going to help her overcome the king. I don't think it's ever explicitly said necessarily, but it's definitely, you can tell.
I was a little confused on her motivation for a little while, but it does eventually become pretty clear what she's trying to do. I wish they could have set it up earlier than they did, though. Because when she gets the trolls and brings them to the king, I legitimately just thought she was going to have the king eat the trolls. I was like, why are you doing this? And it took me a little while they had to, I don't know, maybe, I just think maybe her motivation could have been revealed a little earlier.
Yeah.
It was kind of like you just had to take a guess as to what it was for a while until it became pretty obvious. But anyway, yeah, what about the chef for you?
I just loved watching this character because it's like, I think this is to your point, like her motivation, like it was clearly there, and it was, I don't think purposefully subtle. But I love just watching her try to like do all this evil stuff in the context of this is a movie about the kids' toys trolls.
Right. Yeah. Well, that didn't surprise me at all, but you know what I will say? As a villain, I wasn't crazy about her. She was pretty much all looks and not much substance. She looked threatening, and she had a good voice actress, and that's about the extent of it. Like, I didn't care much for her as a villain.
Yeah, Christine Baranski.
Right, it was an okay, but whatever. I want to say some things I liked about this film. Because
wait, maybe we should real quick just tell people how this film ended, because
okay, sure, yeah.
Oh boy,
it ends
what
on
a
a song
thing.
and dance number. That's because of course it does, right? Because of course it does.
Not only any song and dance number, Can't Stop This Feeling.
That's right. And they dance and sing, and it's yeah,
basically what happens is Bridget helps the trolls escape, and then she pretty much puts her life on the line by bringing an empty dish where the troll should be. The trolls, realizing that she helped them so much, go back to help her.
Well, Poppy specifically
Go back to help her, and then the old message of the film, hey, you can be happy without eating us. And everyone dances. I vaguely remember the Bergen like basically getting up and exclaiming, "What? No way!" Something like that.
Yeah, no, they do. Yeah, that, I mean, it's the third part that you said that is what loses me. So okay, so they find out they can be happy without eating a troll. Okay, and then they dance. Oh, all right. That's
right.
where I'm like, great.
And they're dancing, and it's bringing color back to their village.
Yeah, which, all right.
Branch becomes colored.
Sure, Branch becomes colored a little ways earlier. Okay, so now we can get into the stuff I like, because this ties in. I like the central theme of the film, and in relation to the Bergens. I like the arc of them believing there's no way they can be happy and being taught that they can be. I don't like how it played out, but that's neither here nor there. I like the central theme, but the message is a little weird, because it's kind of just be happy, kids. And I'm like, oh, great message. That's how we... Hey, do you feel a little sad? Well, just be happy. Thanks, trolls.
Problem solved.
Yeah. But that being said, the theme was fine. It was well presented, and I feel like it came across. I just think that the song and dance number was the dumbest possible way you could have resolved it. But yeah, I mean, let's see, what else did I like? I liked the art style. I didn't like the character designs. Like I said, I thought they were ugly. But the whole thing where the film looked like felt was actually really nice. I really liked the environments, especially. Everything looked very pretty. Besides the character designs, which were all awful. And also the Bergen village, which, like I said, was so drab, which I understand why it was drab, but we spent like half the movie there. But the forest and everything was very colorful and nice and pretty, and I liked looking at that.
And that's why I like that disco scene. That was a very pretty scene that they had developed. I think her hair was the hair that they gave her when they made her all pretty. That was interesting. And also I thought that the gimmick of like bringing color, one, back to the trolls, and then two, back to the village, I thought that looked nice as well.
It looked nice, yeah. Too bad they were dancing and singing Can't Stop the Feeling.
Or what was the other one? True Colors.
True Colors. Okay, speaking of True Colors, this is a thing I give the film credit for, but I also don't at the same time. So one complaint I frequently have, which I don't know how many kids films I've reviewed actually, but one film I consistently have in family movies, kid films, whatever, is okay, so one important part of a film structure is the second act low point. This is where, at the end of the second act, transitioning into the third act, the main characters face turmoil. And it's serious turmoil that threatens to destroy their entire motivation, right? Now, the way the vast majority, maybe I should say vast majority, the way a ton of family films decide to present this second act low point is in this ridiculous, stupid, overplayed, and often completely unnecessary cliche where all the lead characters split up and they get sad and then they get back together and defeat the bad guy. This happens in so many movies, and I can count on one or two hands at most the amount of films in which it has worked. One of them being How to Train Your Dragon, just because. But regardless, I fucking hate this. And Trolls, I really thought they were going to do that. I really thought that Branch and Poppy, like Branch was gonna say something mean to Poppy, and then Poppy, her face, she'd get sad, and then a tear would roll down, and then a sad pop song plays, and she walks away.
Yeah, and I mean, it was the perfect setup for it, too, because usually the biggest part of this is you have two characters that are dichotomous.
Yes.
And then that sets up at the beginning, and then for whatever reason they clash at that second act low point, and that's why they split. So this was a perfect setup for that to have happened.
Yeah, and it didn't happen. The second act low point was not we're gonna split up. That didn't happen. The second act low point, I have my own problem with it, which is why I said I give them credit and don't. But they didn't do that cliche, which, thank you for that at least. Instead, one thing I hate about that cliche is that it just forces the movie to stop for a while. And it doesn't add anything. Well, in this film, the second act low point still just made the movie stop. And what happens is, Poppy thinks she can't do it. She gets sad and her color disappears. This is when you learn that the color means happiness, essentially, right?
Right, and specifically, all the trolls get captured.
Right, yeah. And
the entire village.
Yeah. And she thinks it's over. She's like, I tried, I failed.
Yeah, because one thing I think we forgot to mention was James Corden, who, again, this is his first animated film since Norm of the North. Of
course.
His character is like this guru. He's the one that they think gets eaten, and he basically rats them out.
Yeah.
And so the Bergens find out where all the trolls are hiding and capture all the trolls.
I gotta say, that wasn't a great twist, because just like all the other trolls, he wasn't very developed either. So I wasn't like, oh, no way he would do that. You know?
Right. It was like literally the second time you see him in the movie, basically. He's like, hey, by the way, I sold you out.
Yeah, that's right. But so they give up, she gets sad, and then the movie stops, and everything gets dark, and then he sings True Colors to her. and then the movie continues again. So I still didn't like it because it still just made the movie stop. But I give it credit; it was better than I thought it was going to be. And it's that their second act low point is a better second act low point than the we're all gonna split up thing. So I'll at least hand that to them. But it was still very much like, okay, here's the part where you can get up and go to the bathroom because the movie's gonna just take a second here, and then it'll start again in a second. I didn't feel it added much, but I will say it is the part where Branch sings, and then he becomes colorful. So it did have some purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that it was a well conducted scene. I think that there was some nuance there. You finally connected, as you mentioned, color to happiness, which I don't think is like a crazy, like, oh, I've never seen that before as a metaphor, but it was, it very much showcased, like, this whole time they had been making the Bergen village to be very drab, very bland. And even we find out Creek, or whatever his name is, Branch, Tree Trunk, I don't know. It turns out he actually had lost his color as well. Yeah. Even throughout the beginning of the film, he becomes colored again. And as he's singing True Color, as you mentioned, Poppy becomes colored again.
Yeah.
So in that way, I thought it was actually quite smart of them to do.
I agree.
And I agree that I think that even though I do think that, yes, it stopped the film, it didn't stop the film in the way that the normal cliche does, where it's like, okay, they split and then they're both sad. It shows one being sad. It shows the other being sad. And then there's something that happens to make them get back together.
Yeah.
It did stop the film, but it at least still had momentum in that you were learning something about the characters and the movie was moving forward in that way.
I suppose, but I still do feel like it halted a little too much. I'm not against the film getting dark for a second or something like that. The issue is the entire scene was like mostly black. There was a lot of black, a lot of gray.
Yep. A lot of gray.
A lot of and that's what I mean is it just made the movie, it felt to me like it was like, oh, okay, well, here's this part. And then he sings True Colors slowly. And then, okay, whatever. But I agree. That's why I give them some credit because it was better than the split up thing, and it did give you some insight, and there was some character development there, which, that's all fine and dandy. Other than that, I can't really think of much else I liked. I never laughed ever. I never found myself particularly moved. There were scenes involving Poppy and Branch that were okay, where I thought their chemistry was okay. Poppy is an okay character, I guess. And, yeah. That's about it.
So now, the final question, and I think what the audience wants to know. Do Anna Kendrick's and Justin Timberlake's characters smooch at the end?
That's right, they don't.
Although it sure does look like they get pretty close.
That's another thing where I want to give this movie... Wait. No, they don't, but he still falls in love with her.
Right, they're clearly in love. They don't smooch, but you can definitely tell.
Yeah, they still do the love thing, which I'm just tired of at this point.
Then the best part is the cloud comes back at the end, and we were all waiting for it.
Yeah, when he came back, I clapped.
Yeah, I gave myself a high five, but I was also too slow.
Yeah, well, anyway, I think it's pretty clear. My final... I definitely... This movie is the definition of a flat 5 out of 10 for me, where I don't feel like I'm liking it or disliking it really in either direction to any major extent, But it's better than I thought it would be. I'll give it that.
So maybe because... this is Get Recc'd. Would you get this someone as a rec?
No. If you want bright, colorful, happy, fun, sing-songy, you can do much better than this. So, no.
All right. There you have it.
We will move on, I suppose, right? I guess we're done with Trolls?
Yes.
Well, why don't you give your final verdict on Trolls, though? I mean, I think it's been pretty clear, but...
Yeah, I would say pretty much my thoughts were the same. I think my watermark might be a little higher. I'd probably give it maybe a 7.
Whoa.
I thought I thought that it was it was a little more than watchable, I would say.
That sounds more like a 6 to me than a 7. You sound...
Yeah, 6, 7, somewhere in that range.
Right.
I think that like I would. It's something that you could put on in the background and be like, "Yep, I saw it," and it was. I like the songs. It was colorful. I think maybe one thing that we should mention is that 100%. This is a kids movie first and foremost. You can tell that, and I think that this does an absolutely wonderful job of being a kids movie. I think that this is, it has all the colors, it has all the fun songs. To me, it's in the same category as like Sing, in that regard, where I watched Sing and I was like, if I was a child, I would be like, yeah, okay.
Well, I don't know. You could, even as far as kids films go, you could do much better than this. I'm not going to give so because the film is like a 5 and it's just completely in the middle for me. That means a kid I can watch it, and so could a kid. I mean, kids can watch fucking anything, so, I mean, really, ultimately, anything works as a kid's film, but I don't know. I've seen films, I've just seen better than this, and even for what this film is trying to do, I've seen far better, so I don't even know if I could meet you there, but yeah, I mean, if you have a kid, I mean, you could put this on, they'll probably like it,
Yeah, and plus you don't want to miss out on all the backstory before you go see Trolls 2.
That's right, yeah. Trolls 2, not to be mistaken for Troll 2. There is a difference.
Yeah. But it is all in the same canon.
Oh, yeah, same canon, yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Well, we'll move on. So I recommended to Steven, here it is. We got it up on screen. This is Trout Mask Replica by Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band. This is Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band's 1969 classic, Trout Mask Replica. This album was produced by the legendary Frank Zappa. He produced this album, although the extent to which he produced it is still sort of unknown. All we know is that Frank Zappa, Captain Beefheart kind of just did his own thing. He wouldn't put on headphones when he sang. He refused. Brief background of this album that I think is incredibly important is that this album was recorded over the course of, I believe, 9 months, maybe 6, something like that, 6 to 9 months, somewhere in that range, at one house that Captain Beefheart would not let his band leave. He had a very domineering personality, a very violent personality. He was a complete asshole. Let's just get that out of the way. He was incredibly strict, harsh, and he basically forced his musicians to work like the guy in Whiplash. Like that's what this was. He composed the songs on a piano that he did not know how to play, and he had the drummer John French write down and notate the things he was playing on the piano, and then put them into the 2 guitars and the bass separately, and they rehearsed these songs tirelessly, which you can definitely tell. Well, depends. But
yeah, I don't know if I'd agree with that. But
they rehearsed the songs tirelessly over the course of these 9 months, and then they recorded them in, I think, a 6-hour session. So they recorded it much faster than you would have expected. And this was further background. This is Captain Beefheart's 3rd album. His previous 2 albums were a little experimental, but really listenable blues rock. He just has a really crazy voice, but it's pretty. And I highly encourage anybody looking into this album to listen to Safe as Milk first, which I didn't do for Steven very intentionally. Safe as Milk is his first album, and you can see this is wildly different. And yeah, this is held up as one of, if not the most experimental rock record ever created. Nobody has done something more experimental in the realm of rock than this, I would argue. In jazz, absolutely, but in rock, perhaps not. But I'll stop because I can mention some brief stuff like that later on. So, Steven, what did you think of Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band's Trout Mask Replica?
Hey, way to give me a softball recommendation, huh, bud? Man, what a just simple, just very straightforward listening album. I was like, man, I've heard all these sounds before in my ears. Put this on the radio,
Oh,
bud.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
DJ,
Yeah,
give me some of that Frownland.
I gave it to you because I knew that it would be very listenable for you. You would really enjoy the
Yeah, it's just... Yeah, that would be probably my first review point, is just so listenable. Wow. Put it on in the background and just have a good time.
Yeah, and it's a very manageable length, too. That's one thing I really like about it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So all of that was a lie. I don't think any of those things. All right. So I think the way I'm going to tackle this is I'm going to give you... And these notes that I put are in order of while I was listening. So first I'm going to give you what I put as just kind of my general notes. Okay. And then I didn't put notes on every track, but kind of as we go through the album.
Sure. Oh, I should also mention this is the double album. Yeah, I just want to point that out.
Okay.
Double album.
So... I'm not even sure. Well, maybe what I should say first before we start talking about it is I had never even heard of this before. I know you had heard of Trolls before, so it's not like something that's like completely new.
Yeah, I
had never even heard of this. I had never even heard of this band, this person.
This is a very music nerd centric album. This is not an iconic album to anyone outside of that culture, really.
Right.
Which I knew, which is one of the reasons why I told you to listen to it.
Right, so I came in completely without any knowledge of this. So I would say that the biggest thing is that what the fuck is this? This avant-garde.
Yeah.
What are even as I look through the track listing,
right?
None of these words make sense together. And I would say that if he did one thing, it was that not only in the name of the track, in all the lyrics that he has in every single one of these songs are just absolutely nonsensical.
Okay.
And I think I had a so the biggest one, I had some examples of what I mean by this. So Fast and Bulbous comes up pretty much all the time.
Fast and Bulbous?
Bulbous.
Yes, it does.
And so specifically, this is just a straight read. That's right, the mascara snake. Fast and Bulbous.
Also a tinned teardrop.
Just talking about that track specifically, and this is not just the only one, but
Pina?
I don't know if it's like, and that track specifically is Pina.
Pina, yeah.
There are a couple of these tracks where it's like there's almost this behind the scenes element where they just didn't edit out some of the conversation that they had in recording.
Well, they left it in, yeah.
They specifically left it in. I think it was 100% intentional, but it happens a couple times. I thought it was very interesting. Specifically in this Pina one, they're telling each other how they have the interaction between that's right, the mascara snake, Fast and Bulbous, and then what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And
but
it
you gotta wait until I say also a tin teardrop. Yeah.
I thought musically this was a mess. Just up and down. One of the things that I mentioned in my notes was and I think that this is almost genius in a way, as much as it is just a complete nonsense. Right. But there are what I would say like multiple layers of sound within each track.
Absolutely. Almost
to the point where it's like everyone on the track is playing a different song.
No, they are. Yeah, they totally are. Yeah, yeah, keep going.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, the bass, for example, on the vast majority of songs, it's not the rhythm section. It's just playing its own riff. So even the bass, like, there's two guitars and a bass, and obviously drums. The two guitars and the bass are, they're completely doing their own thing on the vast majority of these songs.
100%. And I don't know if I have specific tracks, but I mentioned that some tracks are like, it's just 3 songs in one.
Yeah.
He's giving you this weird beat poetry. The guitar is making this like just cacophony noise, and the bass is and the drums are not even rhythmically attached.
They're not, no.
To anything else that's happening.
Well, Well, the drums absolutely are, but they're constantly shifting between the three different rhythms that are happening in the guitar, the two guitars and the bass. Like, one thing I will say is that the drumming on this album is some of the most incredible drumming I have ever heard. It is astonishingly good.
Yeah, and I wrote that as well, and I also wrote that there are sometimes some really great guitar riffs too.
Yes.
And I think that when it wants to be, like when there is, it almost gets to a point where you're listening to this and you get accustomed to the fact that there is this non-cohesion always happening, and it can be very smart musically when it wants to be.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that happens all the time, or majority of the time.
It doesn't happen. No, it absolutely doesn't. But like tracks like Ella Guru, for example.
Ella
Guru's very, very in tone. Moonlight on Vermont is a great example. Because Moonlight on Vermont, it's definitely a strange riff. This like ascending and this constantly ascending and descending guitar riff. It's a strange riff, but you could show this to most people, and I don't think they'd be too off-put by that track.
The other one that I mentioned was, so Ella Guru was one that I mentioned. There's finally this cohesion.
Yeah.
The talk through is just nonsense.
It's very dissonant, though. It's not like it's like even the riff is very much it's very much not like a very nice, pleasant chord structure, but it is absolutely coming together into something.
The other one that I mentioned was Pachuco Cadaver.
Oh, fuck yes. Yes.
So that one I also felt like you can tell that there's some real musicality here.
Yes.
It's just getting there is like a nightmare. I mean, because here's the thing about this. I'm kind of all over the place, but here's the thing about this record. Mm-hmm. It starts and you're just like, what the hell is this?
Yeah,
Frownland is just this asyncopated, harsh, like just mess of a track, and that's how this thing opens.
Immediately. It is immediate. One thing, Frownland as an opening track doesn't do what your typical opening track does, because honestly, if you place Frownland in here, if you swap Frownland out with like a lot of other songs here, it's not like you would feel like one of the other songs was as like, it's not like Frownland really feels like an opener, if you see what I'm trying to say. It's very much, you could swap it out with some of the other songs in here and you wouldn't really tell, but Frownland's one of the most, if not the most, rhythmically complex tracks on the album, and so there was definitely a clear intention in opening it with that, because it just dives you in. It gives you no time, no introduction, just immediately, as soon as this thing starts, it's just like, wow.
This thing starts and it is like strap in, because it goes from Frownland to the dust blows forward and the dust blows back.
That's right.
And it's just this talk through with radio skipping.
He's singing, yeah.
I wouldn't even call it singing necessarily.
Or where blows a popper come tail. Yeah, I mean, he's singing.
Dust blows forward and dust blows back.
Yeah.
And just from there, it's not until Ella Guru where this, like, and we just talked about it, it's not until Ella Guru where it's like, okay, here's music, finally, and not just noise. But one thing that I mentioned as I was listening to this track, or this album for like a second time, is the structure of this album is in such a way where that progression happens a couple times.
Yeah.
So it happens at the very beginning. You're hit with just this nonsense.
Right.
And then it kind of gets to this cohesion. I feel like that happens again up to probably Neon Matte Dream of an Octafish.
Yeah.
So that one is just this cymbal noise, like almost the whole time.
Yeah, that one's crazy.
So that's when it kind of restarts almost.
Well, I don't know. Hair Pie. I want to mention, because you mentioned up to that point, I want to mention the transition from Hair Pie to Moonlight on Vermont, or Hair Pie Bake 1 to Moonlight on Vermont. One of my favorite moments on the album. So Hair Pie Bake 1, if you'll remember, is the track where about 3 minutes of it's just that like completely atonal saxophone, which Beefheart plays consistently throughout this album. He's playing saxophone. And so then the band comes in, but it's like from another room. And then slowly it gets louder until you can hear their composition. on Hair Pie, which is a very it's not as cacophonous as some songs, but it's certainly asynchronous because it like, and same thing with Hair Pie Bake 2, where it's like you'll have one section and then it'll transition into another one with absolutely no real attempt at transitioning. It just transitions constantly over and over again. And then that gives way to like this sort of field recording where Beefheart's like having I don't know, some woman listen to the music, and it lasts for like 30 seconds, and then like Moonlight in Vermont comes in with those like pounding drums. When it's moments like these when I think you can really tell there was absolutely an intention to what was going on here. When you get something like that transition is very intentional and very good, might I add too. Because I mentioned Moonlight in Vermont, but I love the way that it comes in. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mentioned that because of that, it really plays on your expectations in a way that I think is actually quite nice. I mentioned the lead up from China Pig to Pina is actually like it gets you into this groove, and then Pina is just like this complete shift of expectation where it's just like nonsense
Pina
again.
Is absolutely insane.
It's just I don't even. So I mentioned that this album is clearly very avant-garde and very surreal, but I want to be specific when I say surreal. I mean they were definitely on drugs.
They were not. They were in fact not. If they were on drugs, I guarantee you these musicians would not have been able to play these songs. And we'll get to that because I understand how it sounds and how it really does just sound like everybody's like just fiddling around on their instruments a lot of the time, you know? And that's what a lot of people say when introduced. They say like they're not like I could do what they're doing. They're not even trying, you know? It's like this is very much not the case. We'll get to that, but I'm just saying it's funny you bring up they're on drugs. That's what most people would typically say, like, oh, they're all on drugs. They weren't, and they certainly could not have been because they would have been way messier than they actually are here. And I also want to mention Beefheart was a completely insane man. He didn't need drugs. He was insane.
That does not surprise me in one bit.
Yeah.
You hinted at this in one of the other tracks where they're moving from one room to the other. I do think that one of the things that I thought was really interesting about this album is, so I mentioned that there are multiple layers of sound, I felt, and I think that's not just in, like, there are multiple songs going on in one, which was kind of crazy.
Right.
But there's also this really smart use of filtering and three-dimensional space. So in China Pig, you can tell the layout of the instruments and then where he is in relation to the mic creates this very three-dimensional sound because he is way far back from the mic. Most of the instruments are much closer. So I thought that was interesting. That happens a couple times.
That track specifically kind of sounds like somebody going out on their back porch on the bayou and playing a song, and then somebody a house away records them doing that outside.
Right.
That's what China Pig sounds like. You're right. No, it absolutely does.
Here's another example of some of the just nonsense. I'm sure it has meaning, but I was like, this is just stupid.
Which one?
So this is the My Human Gets Me Blues.
Ugh.
Here's an example. Dress you the way he wants because he never had a dog, and they made him a boy. And God didn't ask his preference.
No, I think Beefheart's poetry is absolutely great. I love it. I love his word. I love the words he puts together. It's very fun. Sometimes I'll just read, like, some of these are just work as poems, but
old fart at play is pretty much just a poem.
Yeah.
Like, it is just a poetic interlude.
Yeah.
In the like very end of the track,
but
which is something else to talk about because it's like this album ends with this like almost 2 minutes just like poem, and then Veterans Day Poppy, which is just all the nonsense put together.
I don't know that I would say that about Veterans Day Poppy. Do we want to? Let's not. I don't really want to quite start debating anything yet. So I want to let you finish up your thoughts. So we'll get to that. But I'll put that on the sideburns because Veterans Day Poppy. I got to talk about that.
The only other thing that I would mention is my final thought while I was listening to this. I listened to it multiple times. A group of people got together and made this. And I think that potentially is a shining example of what we can achieve as humans. Because to convince a group of people to have got together to make this is astounding to me.
I absolutely agree, and especially knowing. And did you look this up after you listened to it, or like did you look this album up in any way after you listened to it?
Oh, I not.
Okay. Yeah, because a lot of these band members have, specifically Drumbo, has gone on to write like a book about his experience in this album. It's well documented what happened, and especially how Beefheart was as a person. He was a terrible person who treated his musicians like utter shit. And, you know, when I initially heard the story of Trout Mask Replica, I thought, oh, well, he was doing that intentionally to make them hardened players. But he did this on every album he made. He was just a piece of shit. Not to speak ill of the dead, I guess, but he was just a piece of shit. And he treated them like garbage.
And makes me even more astounded that this could ever happen, because if somebody was treating me like shit and telling me to do this, I would say, no, thank you, sir.
That's the thing. These musicians, who were all like teenagers, they actually saw something in this. They knew they were making something great. This is what they've all said, is this is why they stayed. Because they knew that what they were making was important. And once again, to add to your point, that also astounds me, because it has gone on to be an incredibly important piece of work. It has gone on to be critically acclaimed. Even Rolling Stone Pleb magazine ranks this thing as the 80th best album ever, I think, or something, which their list is kind of trash, but that's neither here nor there. The Library of Congress has this album. I mean, like, this thing is huge. But if I were in their environment, and I make my own music is experimental, but beyond that, I love experimental music. Even with that, if I were being told to make this, especially in the conditions where Captain Beefheart literally didn't know how to play the piano, and I was playing what he played on the piano, I would have probably just said, all right, yeah, fuck this. This is bullshit, and left. As I'm sure most people would have. So these musicians must have just seen something in this that I don't think many people would. Yeah. Oh, also, it's worthwhile to mention that the drummer made Beefheart mad for some reason, and when they released the album, Beefheart made them not credit the drummer. So he was uncredited.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm just saying, it just goes to show that he didn't care he was not a good person. He didn't treat these people well. They tirelessly worked on this, and then he didn't even get his name on the sleeve initially. So
I probably wouldn't put my name on the sleeve of this thing. And maybe that's how I should start my thoughts on this. I did not enjoy it.
Right. I didn't think you would.
It is just a mess. It is just top to bottom noise. Now, I guess that's not entirely fair. There are definitely tracks in here, and I think maybe the first thing I should say is that I feel like this is one of those albums that probably comes up a lot in music review classes. This is probably something that people put as an example of experimental music. And I think that it's one of those things where music people would tell you that this is brilliant. And I'm not going to say that I don't see those things, because as I outlined before, there is a lot in this that I think is very smart. And I think that there is clearly an intention here, and it was 100% nailed. I think that as an experimental album, there has not been much music that I have listened to that I have felt like, as I was listening to it, I questioned my own understanding of what music is or could be.
Yes.
This absolutely made me feel that 100%. And I will say, anyone who listens to this album will make you feel something, even if it is, what the hell is happening in my ears?
Yeah.
There is no doubt that, and I mean, what are we now? Almost 50 years? Is that right? Since this album came out?
It'll hit its 50-year anniversary on 2019. Yeah.
Yep. And this is the first time I have listened to this. And even now, I can say all those things 100% without a doubt.
Yeah.
And so to that, I 100% credit it. wouldn't agree that I think it's good. But from the standpoint of it being an experimental and what it did to music, I have a feeling that this is one of those albums that a lot of groups coming out of the 60s would probably credit as some sort of inspiration for them, especially as experimental music goes. I think 100% it nails that, but I don't think it's good.
Right. I want to mention on that point, though, a lot of bands, especially new wave bands, and new wave guitarists, almost all cited this thing as an inspiration. The guitar playing on this, that kind of like jerky style, is very much what new wave was predicated upon. And you may not recognize that, but these guitarists who listened to this album saw the guitar work and they emulated this. So even bands like fucking Blondie, I think the guitarist for Blondie cites this as an influence.
Yeah, and I had specifically called out that I do think that there are some really smart, both, there's some really smart drumming in here. We talked about that. And then I do think there's some really smart and really great guitar riffs in here as well throughout the album.
Yeah, I'll say I knew you were not going to like it. I'm not surprised. That's why I told you to listen to it. I'm sure when you started it, you realized exactly why I told you to listen to this. At least I would.
Yeah, and it's like from minute 0, I could tell.
Yeah, I know.
With this one.
Well, something that was funny to me was I knew that were you watching it on YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I knew because on YouTube it says it's an hour 19 long, and because the album begins with Frownland, I knew how you were going to feel when you started the album and realized what you were about to listen to for an hour and 19 minutes, and that gave me joy. So I told you to listen to it. Now, I will say what I think about this album. You may or may not be surprised. Probably not. I fucking love this album. I have listened to I have worn this thing out. It's in my, I don't exactly have a top favorites, but this is probably somewhere in my top 20 or 30, especially in terms of how much I listen to it. And when I first went into it, I knew the background. I intentionally didn't want you to know the background, but when I went into it, I knew the background on it. I understood that this was considered pretty much the weirdest album in rock. I knew that that's what it was going to be. And when I first listened to it, I wasn't shocked by it, only because I knew kind of what I was getting into. I understood what it was regarded as, how it was regarded, what people said about it. But I certainly wasn't enamored with it. I played it and I was like, I see what they're going for. I immediately understood what they were going for. But I wasn't certain. And one of the things that even people that there are people who will say this album is a good album, but the next Beefheart album was better. The next Beefheart album is very similar to this. It's called Lick My Decals Off, Baby. It's very similar to this, but it's 30 minutes long. As opposed to this album, which is over an hour. And that is a lot of people's complaint is I like what they're doing, but it's too long. And if you don't like what they're doing, it's definitely too long. You don't get a break. If you're listening to it on record, you get a break between the two discs, but that's it. Yeah, it's insane. It's a double album. And keep in mind, Beefheart's album before this.
Yeah, so I didn't know that actually. So at what point does the second album start?
So the first disc ends with Dolly's Car, and the second disc starts with Hair Pie Bake 1.
Okay.
So yeah, yeah. So to me, I have realized over time while listening to this, because it didn't take me long to actually like this, strictly because of the way, what it did to me. As the listening experience of this thing, you said this, and it's, you can't listen to this and not feel something. You're going to feel something. And I think what could certainly be described as ugliness of this album, the dissonance of this album, is so wildly out there that it immediately appealed to me, because I was like, I don't think I'll ever hear anything that sounds like this ever. Certainly free jazz music can be this weird, but And this album is essentially a free jazz album with rock instruments. But rock music never gets this weird. It certainly hasn't since then. There's a lot of weird rock music out there, but this thing hasn't been topped. And like you said, it's almost 50 years old. No one's really done something this crazy. And that was one thing that I appreciated immediately. I was like, I don't think I'm going to hear anything like this ever again. And this is all, and you know, for some people that'd be a good thing. But over time listening to it, I started to piece pretty much every song together. And like I said, it is not just a music snob myth that this thing was very intentional, and because it's a fact. There's even proof of this because there are earlier demo recordings of these songs, and the structures are identical. I mean, they were rehearsing these things for months. Even the songs that are completely cacophonous, like the ones you were talking about, were rehearsed to death so that they sounded exactly the way that they are in this record, so that every note was in the exact place that it was written to be. There's no doubt that this is not just people fiddle fucking around on their instruments. These are a collection, excluding maybe Beefheart, of incredible musicians who are playing things that two people, I don't know how anybody can play the things these people were playing simultaneously. When there's a great video I watched recently by a music professor who broke down Frownland. Remember, Frownland's like a 1 minute, 40-second song, right? Really short.
Yep.
The video's 40 minutes long. And he details every single rhythm that's going on. It's ridiculous. It's insane. And when you listen to the individual riffs, you realize it's not just a bunch of bullshit. Like, each of these riffs are riffs. All of them. Everything's a legitimate riff. They're just being meshed together in such a way where nothing really makes sense. I believe in the first 5 seconds of the album, one guitar is playing in like 7/5 time, or 7/4 or something, and the other one is playing in 5/4. These are two rhythms that should never come in contact with each other, but they do. And they do every single time that the rhythms shift, and all the tracks where that happens consistently. But it's one thing to just say the album is complex. I think that's fairly obvious. It's another thing entirely to say, well, does that make it good? And it certainly makes it an achievement that I don't think anybody should deny. I think you'd kind of be lying to deny that there was an achievement here. But whether it's good or not is obviously going to be subjective. And it's very clear what the sound of this album is. It's very clear what... how it makes people feel when they hear it. And it's very clear that this was the intent. But if you don't enjoy feeling that way, if you don't enjoy hearing these insanely dissonant, aharmonious rhythms all being played at once, this album is going to destroy you. You're going to absolutely hate it. So
yeah, and that's why, so it's a little hard for me to put my final thoughts on this. So as I mentioned, I don't think this album's good. However,
right.
Exactly to your point, this album made me really feel something. So would I say I would listen to it again? Absolutely, I would listen to it again. Really? I would listen to this thing like a lot more. Probably not back to back, but like
right.
Maybe once a year, put this thing on and just experience it, because that is the biggest thing. It's an experience.
Oh yeah.
Whatever that experience is to you probably will vary very differently. Yeah. I did not think the experience was good.
Right.
But it is an experience, and it's something that I can't say about a lot of music or entertainment in general, what this thing can do. And I know that sounds absolutely hyperbolic, but
yeah.
it's true. So that's why I would wrap this up. Would I get this somebody as a rec? Yes, I think everyone should listen to this thing. Even if you don't listen to all of it, just start it and be like, what is happening? Because and I will tell you, you will feel that the whole way through.
Yeah. I'd like to real quick before we end, I'd like to highlight, and I'll wrap up my own thoughts, I guess, but I'd like to highlight some I wanted to talk about Veterans Day Poppy as a closer here, because you said that Veterans Day Poppy feels like it's all of the chaos coming to a head. I would very much argue the opposite, and that Veterans Day Poppy, the first like half of this track is very listenable. It really is. It's the guitar lines are wild. They're going all over the place, but nothing sounds dissonant. It actually sounds kind of joyous, especially with Beefheart's performance on this track. But then it gives way to a section in this track, which is the only moment, you may know what I'm talking about, the only moment in the entire album that sounds like normal music. And it's this blues rock riff that plays for about 30 seconds. I don't know if you remember it, if you were paying attention to it. But there's like 3 parts of this track, and the second part of this track sounds like a blues rock song. There is nothing weird about it, and it's amazing. And then it crossfades into the final 2 minutes, which is, the only way I can describe it is the most beautifully ugly 2 minutes of music put to tape. It's the only way I can describe it. It's an amazing ending to the album, but if this is the moment you were referring to, do you know what I'm talking about, the section I'm referring to here?
Yeah, and that's probably exactly what I'm referring to.
Yeah. And it's just like, it's an incredible, like, I think this is an incredible closer. One of the best I've ever heard. Veterans Day Poppy, just, it's amazing. And in comparison to the opener, which, like I said, doesn't really feel much like an opener, it's just plunging you right in. Veterans Day Poppy very much feels like a closer. But, and then finally, My Human Gets Me Blues is a legitimate jam. I'm just gonna say that. That track, I fucking love that track.
Agree to disagree on that one, I think.
I love I love that track. But yeah, yeah, I mean, I'm interested. You know, I'm fascinated because I honestly thought, I'm a little surprised. I knew you weren't going to like it. I didn't know that you would even appreciate it, though. Like, I'm surprised that even I'm genuinely surprised that you, especially because you didn't research it at all. And I think that's great. I think that's great. I think that but I definitely think that if you're going to listen to this thing, and I mean, we're talking Get Recc'd, would you wreck this? Yes, you would wreck this. I would too. But don't expect to like it as much as I do. That's going to depend on how much experimental music.
I would say in general, don't expect to like it.
Right, yeah. I think there are definitely there are people out there who will hear this and they will be hit with like sheer bliss, and they will think this thing is like there are. For sure. I would just say don't go into this being like, man, this is going to be a real banger. Yeah. I'm going to put this file on my iPod. Yeah. No, absolutely. But yeah, if you listen to experimental music, and I'm not just talking like experimental, like slightly experimental music that's still like Radiohead or something, which is still very listenable. It's experimental but very listenable. I mean, like dissonant, abrasive music. You'll probably get something out of this. Like, I think 100%. None of these tracks would ever be radio tracks. No, not at all. Yeah, the closest one would be Moonlight on Vermont, but even that is way too wild. Yeah, but I mean, I agree. It's an experience, and everyone should have it. Show it to your grandma. That's what we're really trying to say. Show Trout Mask Replica to your grandma. Yeah, don't make her listen to it. Just show it to her. I think that will elicit enough of a response. Yeah, just look at the album art. Like, God. Look at the grandma. Yep. Okay, so I'm. With that, you should move on to the final segment of the show. I will. So this is. Do you want me to explain, or do you want to explain? Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Yeah. So this final segment is when we will tell each other what to watch next, or what to listen to next, or whatever. We will make our next rec. And I will let Steven begin, because we just did Trout Mask Replica, so I will let Steven give me his recommendation, and what he will do is give me some facts, some background, and anything else he wants to tell me about what he is about to recommend me, and I will do the same for him. So, Steven, you can... But to be clear, only facts. I'm not going to, and this is a predication of the show, I'm not going to give you my opinion now, and
the expectation is that neither of us will look up any sort of reviews on this thing.
Right.
It will strictly be, as best as to our ability, a complete blind listen through, watch through, whatever it might be.
Right.
So I'm going to give you an album definitely nowhere near as complex. In fact, not complex at all. It is pretty pop rock of an album.
Okay.
But it's something that I've been listening to a lot lately, and I've enjoyed quite a bit. It is Haim's Something to Tell You.
Okay.
This is an album that released on July 7th of earlier this year. It is only 42:34 in length. Haim, the band, is a band made up of 3 sisters, the Haim sisters, Elena, Danielle, and Esty.
Okay.
They are the oldest, the middlest, and the youngest sister. This is their second album, actually. So their first album was Days Are Gone, which came out in 2013. It had 1 or 2 tracks that I would say got to some sort of radio popularity, but I wouldn't say that they're necessarily in the forefront of pop.
Right.
Even this album has not necessarily got to as much radio popularity so far. They've been featured on SNL. They've been featured through Taylor Swift's posse, basically. I would say that I won't give you the influence, but you'll definitely feel the influence of certain musicians as you're listening to this album, even in their previous album. They definitely have some influences from this. I should mention, it's pop rock, but I would lean more heavily on the rock side.
Sure. And
they definitely have very specific rock influences that I think you'll pick up on pretty quickly.
Right.
As I mentioned, it's their second album. It has a total of, I believe, 11 tracks. I think that's the big facts on that one. So as I mentioned, Haim's Something to Tell You.
Okay. How do you spell their band name?
Haim.
Got it. Okay. Well, I will check it out. And I hear you've been listening to it a lot lately, so I have a suspicion of how you feel about it, but we'll see.
But I've also been listening to Captain Beefheart's Trout Mask Replica a lot lately. So
that's a great point. Okay, well, I will recommend you. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen if you don't mind. I will recommend you. It's a bit last minute. I admit. I'm sorry, but wait, hold on. Yes, I want to recommend you the first 8 episodes of Netflix's BoJack Horseman. So, what are the facts on this? I guess, yeah, it's a, okay. So it is I will just be very, very objective. So it is a Netflix animated, adult animated comedy, a Netflix original. It has ran for 4 seasons now. And each season being, I think, 12 episodes long. I suppose you could call, I guess the best genre descriptor is comedy drama or dramedy. But I don't know how much else I can really say about it. I guess I can, it stars...
Do you know what year that premiered?
Oh, yeah. Season 1 premiered 2013? Wait, let me make sure of that. No, sorry. 2014. Season 1 premiered in 2014. That's what you will be watching. Yeah. So
I know. So some things I know about it, just from a fact standpoint, it stars. I'm trying to think of his name from
Will Arnett.
Will Arnett. Yeah, stars Will Arnett.
Will Arnett and who else? Amy Sedaris, Allison Brie, Aaron Paul, Paul Tompkins. There you go. Keith Olbermann is in it. Yeah.
Okay,
and
great.
I don't think I can say anything else on it, so there you go.
Okay, well, I've been meaning to check it out, so this will be a good excuse.
Great, yeah.
Okay, so a couple housekeeping items before we wrap up here. So this was our first episode of Get Recc'd. These we're planning on probably being bi-weekly episodes.
Mhm.
So in a fortnight, we will come back with our thoughts on what we just recommended to each other and then have new recommendations to give. We're also planning, as we go forward, probably to make these, well, not probably, we will be making these live podcasts. We also hope, just in general, as you definitely feel free to follow along with us, as these will be live podcasts.
Yes.
As we're talking about it, feel free to give your thoughts if you did follow along as we give these recommendations.
Yeah, like if you like when we give a recommendation, you can play at home.
Yeah.
You can go do whatever we rec to each other and then come back with us, and we'll all come together.
Yeah, I mean, this podcast really is Oprah's book club.
Yeah, basically.
It's basically that. We're hoping soon enough to actually be on Oprah's book club, the first podcast to be on Oprah's book club. So we'll let you know how that goes.
Yeah, it'll be an exciting time.
It'll be an exciting time.
But I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, well, with that, those were our thoughts. Those were our recommendations. Get Recc'd.